Is the business environment killing you? That is going to be the topic of this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton, and I'm going to be your guide and host while we unpack this really interesting topic. And today I'm going to do something a little bit different because I am going to be sharing with you some content from my book, Unbridled Business, Unlocking Nature's Wisdom to Reinvent Leadership. And I've really been prompted to share this content today, and I think reading it from the book is perhaps the best way to do it because it's something that's been coming up a lot recently. Everyone I've been talking to has been talking about psychological safety, but also a growing realization about how important the environment we are in is to our business success. So let's just kick this off with a quote from Earl Nightingale. Our environment, the world in which we live and work, is a mirror of our attitudes and expectations. So I think there's a lot of hidden dangers in business today. And unlike our ancestors, we don't have to cope with the fear of being killed by a saber-toothed tiger on a daily basis. However, there are a myriad of dangers in business that can harm us, and they can pervade our life. And sometimes they're real and sometimes they are perceived. So examples include the ups and downs of the stock market. Of course, we've seen a lot of that recently since Mr. Trump stepped into power. And of course, these really affect companies' financial performance and their valuations quite considerably. We've seen new technology which can make products obsolete overnight, particularly the advent of AI. We've seen loads of new products coming into the market. It seems every single day I see a new AI product coming into the marketplace. And obviously, for some people, they have some fears that might impact job roles within the marketplace. I actually take a different view. I think actually AI is going to be a liberator for business. People will actually become even more important in the workplace because it's going to be the intellect that individuals can add. That means that AI can do the drudge work, and as individuals, we can do the more interesting work out in the world. So I think that's very exciting. Obviously, competitors are a threat. We obviously got things like government regulations, tariffs, for example, global and geopolitical wars going on. All of these things can come together to hinder growth and profitability. And we are still reeling from the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic because we've really seen a fundamental change in business as a result of that, as companies have had to adopt new working practices. And of course, the concept of remote working has become very commonplace. And definitely what we saw during COVID was some companies absolutely flourished and some really struggled to adapt and survive. So, for an example, from the hospitality industry, we saw restaurants starting takeout menus, something that they had never done in the past. New technology platforms, things like Zoom, started emerging. It had emerged just before the pandemic. Its performance went on a massive upward trajectory as a result of us all having to communicate remotely via the web. And I think in business, there's also some dangerous forces at play internally as well. And leaders that can mitigate the stress that team members feel from the internal threats. Things like intimidation, humiliation, isolation, rejection, maybe staff just feeling like they're not good enough, are real challenges that exist in the workplace. And studies have shown that when people feel safe at work, they perform better. And this is due to our natural biology. The human body is designed to survive and thrive, and we're intrinsically wired this way. And our internal protection mechanism protects us from danger. So we are wired to seek out safety. So just like my horses, when we perceive danger, whether it's real or not, our defenses go up. We go on high alert, and we'll do anything that we can to protect ourselves. And we see this happening in business when the going gets tough. We see companies that stop operating at optimal performance because there's a state of fear, and team members can't access a hidden 90% of their hidden potential. and use that to become really productive and profitable because they're in this state of fear and they shut down. So, of course, the converse is true. When team members feel safe amongst their tribe, they relax, they're more open to trust and cooperation. So, it's a question of biology and anthropology. If certain conditions are met, people feel safe and work together to achieve extraordinary results. And a feeling of belonging, shared values, and deep empathy dramatically enhance trust, cooperation, and problem solving, which in turn improves team performance and therefore business results. It's not skill that enhances team and performance, but rather the ability of people to pull together to get something done, just like my herd of wild horses pulls together to stay safe from a predator attack. So what does this mean? It means the goal of leadership is to foster an environment free of danger by giving team members a sense of belonging, the power to make decisions, and offering trust and empathy. And Simon Sinek refers to this as the circle of safety. And team members, just like my herd of horses, create this circle of safety. They decide who they're going to let in, who they're going to keep out, based on the balance of the circle. And in fact, you only have to watch what happens when one new horse is introduced to a horse herd to see this in action. The existing herd members decide whether they're going to welcome the new horse in. And how the new horse behaves significantly impacts the outcome. And usually we see the new horse is accepted because his fear of being rejected is so high that he complies with the herd's rule. So, as prey animals, not being accepted into the herd could lead to a horse's death from predators. So, if a team member is excluded from the circle of safety, this can create a real challenge. And yet, it's something that I've often observed in business and also I have personally experienced. And I've got to say, it was one of the worst times for me at work when I felt excluded from the circle of safety. And of course, the problem is when people are excluded from the circle of safety, they create their own circles, which then act as silos. And office politics results and mistakes are covered up rather than exposed. The spread of information slows and unease replaces a sense of cooperation and security. And this happens really often in business, and the consequences can be devastating. And in the worst case, the business leader can be forced to resign their position. So in a herd of wild horses, we see this because a herd of wild horses is typically comprised of one male horse, a stallion, and a bunch of female horses, mares. And what happens is when the young male horses reach the age of about 3 years old, they're expelled from the herd and they have to fend for themselves. And they form what we call a bachelor herd. And they effectively create their own silo. Then that enables them to live safely as a group. Because safety on numbers means that all the herd members can be aware of where the predators are and the impending danger. The challenge for the stallion, however, is that as he gets older, those bachelor horses come back to challenge him for his leadership position. So effectively, the silo comes back to haunt the circle of safety. And if the stallion loses the fight, he gets expelled from the herd, and the winning bachelor horse takes over. So when team members exist within a circle of safety, they feel valued by colleagues and cared for by superiors. They feel confident in their leaders, and when they know management cares for them, this creates an environment where there's a free exchange of information and effective communication. And this is fundamental to drive innovation and prevents problems from escalating. It helps the business be more prepared from the dangers from outside and allows it to seize opportunities when everyone freely shares what is on their mind. Trust, innovation, cooperation, and collaboration result from feeling safe and trusted amongst the people we work with. And when this circle of safety is strong, we naturally share ideas, intelligence, and the burden of stress. Every strength within the team is amplified, enabling a business to reach its full potential. But this is the interesting thing. A boss can seriously harm your health. Because a study in 2011 by the University of Canberra in Australia concluded that having a job you hate is bad for your health and sometimes worse than having no job at all. The study revealed that levels of depression and anxiety amongst people unhappy at work were the same or greater than those who are unemployed. And this is because stress and anxiety at work has less to do with the work we do and more to do with weak management and leadership. Your boss can seriously harm your health. When team members know someone cares for them, levels of stress decrease. And this is why so many people in poorly led teams and departments change jobs. Team members have no loyalty to the leader and they have no sense of belonging. And just compare this to the industrial age, where people had jobs literally for life. There was a real sense of community in the business, and everyone knew everyone. High levels of trust existed, and cooperation was the norm. Team members felt that sense of community, they felt cared for, and they made a positive contribution to the business. However, nowadays, as extended family units have broken down, in part due to improved transportation links and communication, communities have become torn apart. People no longer know their neighbors. Many live in isolation. And the primal basic need of social interaction remains unfulfilled. And so what we've seen is that we have become dependent on technology in the form of social media for virtual friendship. Social media helps people feel like they're part of a community. And yet, as many of us have experienced, this is just an illusion. These virtual friends rarely step up to the plate and care for us when the going gets tough. In a similar vein, researchers at the University College in London in 2011 also found that people who did not feel recognized for their efforts were more prone to heart disease. Feelings of control, stress, and our ability to perform at peak potential are all directly tied to how safe we feel in the business. When we're part of a circle of safety with a group of people we trust, there is collective responsibility to cooperate to face outside challenges and threats. However, when there's no sense of belonging, team members are forced to invest time and energy to protect themselves from each other. So we start focusing inward on issues, and this makes us miss external opportunities. And this is bad for business. And internal fighting wastes resources and can blind the company to upcoming threats and opportunities. So success or failure is typically based on expanding leadership excellence and empowering team members, combined with creating a supportive environment. Leaders need to be focused on their team members, and they have to create a strong culture, encourage shared values, understand the importance of teamwork, create trust among the members, maintain focus, and understand the importance of people and relationships to success. Team members enable the business's success, and inspiring leaders are those who create environments where they can care for their team members and place their team members' needs above their own. So let's just look briefly at our human makeup, because team members have an instinct to cooperate and care for one another. Although sometimes I know when we look at business, that can be hard to believe, because everything in the human psyche is designed to help us survive. And our bodies employ a system of positive and negative feelings to promote behaviors that will enhance our ability to get things done and cooperate. So, for example, happiness, pride, joy, anxiety. So just want to first of all explore the feel-good chemicals, which are endorphins and dopamine. So our bodies have designed a system to help us repeat behaviors that are in our best interests. So endorphins and dopamine make us feel good when we accomplish our goals. And these are the chemicals of progress. Endorphins are released in response to stress and fear, and they also mask physical pain. They give us a rush to keep us going. So, for example, when running a marathon, you start feeling really tired, but your endorphins keep you going. Or maybe you've got a very tight client deadline and your endorphins keep you going, working late into the night. The release of these endorphins can almost become addictive because people can start craving the buzz that they get when the chemical is released into the bloodstream. And actually, what can sometimes happen is when people don't get that chemical rush, then they can feel anxious and agitated. And endorphins are also responsible for laughter release because we can't be afraid and laugh simultaneously. Actually, endorphins provide an excellent mechanism for overcoming fear. And this is why laughter is often described as the best medicine there is. Because laughter is a powerful antidote to stress, pain, and conflict. And nothing works faster or more dependably to bring your mind and body back into balance than a good laugh. Humor lightens your burdens, inspires hope, connects you to others, and keeps you grounded, focused, and alert. And laughter's also infectious, isn't it? You know, when we hear one person laughing, it triggers healthy physical changes in the body, and then we can pass that on to other people. Dopamine is the reason for the feeling good when we do something we're looking for or we do something that needs to get done. So dopamine is responsible for satisfaction, for crossing things off our to-do list, for example. It's that positive feeling of progress or accomplishment. Dopamine is what makes humans a goal-focused species because when we achieve a goal, we get this mega kick of dopamine, which is why we keep going and why it feels really good to work hard to achieve something differently. And actually, biologically, there is no incentive to do nothing in the way that the human psyche works. And this is why people can get depressed when they don't have any job or a big focus in life. And a bit like the endorphins, the downside of dopamine is that it can become highly addictive and it could cause alcoholism and binge eating. So those are examples of dopamine working on rewarding behavior, but in a very unproductive way. Now, these feel-good chemicals, the endorphins and the dopamine, don't always produce the results nature intended. And we see this as a big challenge in business when dopamine particularly is the primary reward. Hit the goal, get the money, get the bonus. It can become addictive. And we see then people striving to make the numbers. And what that can do is that can erode the circle of safety because everyone becomes really self-centered and ego-driven rather than considering their impact on other team members. And we really saw that during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, when the bankers, driven by dopamine rewards, lent more and more money than was prudent and gambled big times on stocks that were doomed to failure. So endorphins and dopamine work together to ensure our survival related to food and shelter. They help us get things done to earn a salary and pay for housing and food. So actually, if we think about it, it's no joke when we say we need a job to survive. We really do that way because without endorphins to give us the edge, we'd not keep going when we're tired and exhausted. So dopamine provides the chemical rush when we've accomplished something that makes us want to do it again and again. And the challenge, however, is that success manifests itself best when you're working in a team. And it's harder to do all these things alone, especially the big things, which is why we need to have a balance of serotonin and oxytocin. And serotonin and oxytocin are what we call the selfless chemicals. They keep the circle of safety strong and enable us to feel valued. They bring us feelings of belonging, trust, and inspiration. And unlike some species who are just concerned with self and have no desire to cooperate, humans are actually designed to live in tribes and cooperate with one another. It's been an integral part of our DNA, and it's helped humans survive for thousands of years. So it's the serotonin and oxytocin that help us form bonds of friendship and encourage us to look out for each other, enabling us to create a high-performing business. And when team members cooperate and protect each other, serotonin and oxytocin develop bonds of trust and friendship. They effectively grease the social machine, and when they are missing, friction results. So when a business culture is created without these two chemicals, it sabotages the business, its team members, and their level of happiness. And this is because a business simply can't exist without social interactions amongst team members. So serotonin gives us a feeling of pride. It's the feeling that we get when we perceive that others like and respect us. We feel strong and confident, and it raises our sense of being. As people want and need the approval of other tribe members. And this is why team members value things like rewards, awards, ceremonies, company recognition, because team members want to know that their work is worthwhile. Oxytocin, however, creates the feelings of friendship, love, and deep trust. It's the feeling we get when we're in the company of trusted colleagues and close friends. It's that warm, fuzzy feeling that's needed for empathy, when we know that somebody's there to cover our backs. Oxytocin enables us to trust others and helps us build relationships, feel human connection, and like being in the company of others. Oxytocin makes us social. So as leaders, we need to create an environment that promotes teamwork. And it's not surprising that more gets done when everyone contributes their strengths to the projects. Because when we're working in a group and nobody is isolated, it means that individuals don't have to be vigilant to ensure the safety of the group. The safety of the group becomes everyone's shared responsibility. And with that shared responsibility, individuals are able to rest and do our best work. Oxytocin also directs how vulnerable we can afford to make ourselves, how much we want to open up and trust other people. It also creates instant gratification. However, oxytocin isn't long lasting. So we have to keep getting our fix of oxytocin. And finally, let's just talk a little about cortisol. That kind of gut feeling. We've all heard the phrase, trust your gut feeling. And we've all experienced when something isn't quite right. It's our gut feeling that keeps us away from danger and acts as an early warning system. In fact, in many research studies that I've read, we actually say that we have more brain cells in our gut than we do in our head. And it's cortisol is the chemical that activates the gut feeling that's responsible for any stress or anxiety we experience. It puts us into a heightened state of awareness, alerting us to potential danger and preparing us to take extra measures to protect ourselves and raise our chance of survival. We see this a lot in nature, actually. When I was out in the African bush, you really saw the cortisol kicking in. So, for example, when the zebras are grazing on the African plains, one of them senses danger, and it's almost magnetically everyone else is alerted to the danger. And then they become synchronized as a system, and everyone moves to get away from the danger. I would sometimes see this in the office, right? Where when one person suspects something, they share it with somebody else, and then just like wildfire, the rumors go around the office. The problem is with cortisol is it's not supposed to stay in the bodily system. It's designed to fire off when we sense a threat and then fade when the danger has passed. However, if the threat or the perception of the threat continues, then we end up living in a constant state of anxiety and stress. And this is what causes long-term damage to our internal system. Out in the wild, those zebra, they sense some danger, they run away from it, they just go back to grazing. And all of that cortisol is released from their bodies. Whereas with humans, it stays in our bodies and we reflect on what has happened and why it's happened. And it just continues to eat away at us. And this is what creates this low-level anxiety for us, time and time again. So it means that the problem isn't often with our team members around us, but it's about with the environment. If we are in an environment where everyone cares for each other, then everyone feels good. But many of us work in self-serving environments where group members don't care much for each other's fate. There isn't much empathy. And what that means is the impending danger is often kept secret. And this can result in bonds of trust between team members and leaders becoming very weak. And definitely that is what I experienced when I went through and led my team through the whole of the demise of Arthur Andersen as a result of the Enron scandal, because the cortisol that was going on inhibited the release of oxytocin, which was the chemical responsible for empathy. So we created this negative spiral, which was putting team members into more and more stress. The other thing about this constant flow of cortisol is it plays havoc with our glucose metabolism. And it can increase blood pressure and it impairs cognitive ability. So it makes it harder to concentrate. And high cortisol can also shut down the immune system. And this is why poor cultures where we don't have a great circle of safety, we can often see team members very disengaged, and that translates into more sick days and absenteeism that impacts the bottom line. So there is a ripple effect here of the business environment because it's not a standalone concept, because it's integrally related to all other aspects of business and the greater community. So when a business culture is created that has an unbalanced focus on short-term results and money at the expense of other stakeholders' needs, this impacts society. Whereas conversely, when a collaborative and cooperative culture and environment exists at work, team members are happy, which translates into them being happy at home, and that improves the health and happiness of society. We often say within the horse herd, the role within the horse herd is health, harmony, and unity. And that's because everybody in the herd has each other's back and they are working together. And that is what I would be really passionate about create in the workplace. A place where everyone who comes to work feels safe, feels that they have this circle of safety around them, and then they can make massive strides in increased performance and they have better engagement. So how do we assess the type of environment that we're creating within the business? Is it one that promotes this collaboration and cooperation, or have we created a culture that instills fear and trepidation in team members? And in fact, a study by Deloitte, the Deloitte Shift Index, indicated that 80% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs. So culturally, I think we have a lot to do to improve the culture within organizations. And I think it's really important that as leaders, we consider how do we create a circle of safety and how important that is, just not to the business, but to the wider community. Because if we don't create the right culture and the right environment that nurtures our team members' human needs, we are literally killing our team members' commitment to the business. Because when team members don't feel trusted and valued, they don't contribute. And actually, in many instances, they actively end up sabotaging our business success. So my question to you this week is, how are you consciously building the culture and the environment within your organization? How are you setting your business up for success? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And please do follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And also, please do go and take our free quiz on how to turbocharge your team at businesshorsepower.com/quiz. So until next week, have an amazing time. Bye bye.